Yeah, this is Sunday Edition with Sean Custis and Henry Winter, and we're with you till 11 o'clock and for the last half hour. I'm delighted to say that our special guest is Barry Silkman. Barry is a former Man City Leyton Orient midfielder, would be known as something of a maverick sort of player. A lot of people will remember Barry as a player, and he later became a football agent, and still is. And he also, a man of quite a few hats. He also talks in what is his new book, which, for those watching us on YouTube, I'll hold up. It's called The Not-So-Secret Football Agent, where he also talks about a bit of a singing career, which he had as well. Barry, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Sean. Morning, Henry. Good, thank you.
I'm delighted to see the hair is still there because, as Tony Cascarino said to us this morning, yeah, I remember Silkman. God, the hair put Kevin Keegan to shame, didn't you, when you were a player?
The Barnet's still there.
Barnet's still there. It's hanging on in there. But you were known for not only for you were a skillful player, bit of a maverick sort of player, as I say, and for your hairstyle, and you were an entertainer, if you like, in the lower leagues most.
Yeah. I mean, I played obviously in the top league for Manchester City. Yeah. How I tell people I am, when people say now, even I've got a 14-year-old boy, Saul, and when he asked me what I was like, I said I was really skillful, very, very quick, never made a tackle, and couldn't head the ball. And that is me to a T.
You talk in your book about how you think you might have suited the game better in this era because basically defenders can't kick you up a height and you were a skillful footballer, and that actually there are a lot of people who thought, I think you mentioned at one point that you might have played for Brazil had you been born in Brazil.
Yes, Terry Venables. We played against Blackburn and I was playing for Crystal Palace, and this had never happened to me in my life. We scored 5 goals and I made all 5 of them and walked off the pitch. And even my own players clapped me off, and I was so embarrassed. And TV come up to me, and he went, "Silk, that is the best performance I've seen from a midfield player." Because Terry sometimes would play me on the left wing, and sometimes in midfield, more on the left wing, because I was so quick. But I was more suited to the centre of midfield. But because I never made a tackle, he decided he didn't really want to play me there a lot. And he put his arm around me, he said, "Silk, that is the best performance I've ever seen from a midfield player since I've been a manager." Mind you, he'd only been a manager for about a year or two. He said, "On that performance, you could have played for Brazil." I remember walking off thinking, God, I wonder what would have happened if I did play for Brazil. But that only lasted a moment, that thought.
In that case, just before Henry jumps in, were you I get the impression from reading the book that people were slightly frustrated with you as a player because you had so much skill, and you were slightly frustrated with football because the managers didn't always understand what you were about and what you what you could do and what you couldn't do.
Yeah, they didn't. I mean, to be honest with you, they didn't. I was a fantastic passer of the ball. I was a fantastic dribbler, but I just couldn't defend. And a lot of managers I played for wanted me to chase back and defend, and I just wasn't any good at doing it. And I was always of the belief, and I've been like this since as far back as I can remember, never try and do something you're not good at, because it's going to make you look bad. So in my own head, I used to think, well, if I try and tackle, and if I try and compete in the air, which I'm useless at both of them, managers will look at me and say, well, he's not so good. Because a lot of managers have got the habit, still today, when you mention a player, even scouts, you'll mention a player, they go, well, he can't do this, or he can't do that. Well, when you buy a player, or you pick a player for your team, you don't pick them on what they can't do. You only pick them on what they can do, and how good are they at doing it, and will it make your team better? So right from an early age, I decided not to try and tackle, and not to try and head the ball. And it was very frustrating with a lot of managers who insisted that I chase back and tackle. I could run all day long, just couldn't tackle. That's why I thought in this era today, when you haven't got the Terry Hurlocks and the Norman Hunters tacking you across your thighs, I'd have been far better suited to today's football.
But wasn't it more fun in those days?
It was great. I've got to be honest with you, Henry, I wouldn't change it for the world. If I had a chance to play today, finance has never really meant anything to me, happiness and health. If someone said to me, right, you could start your career again, we'll switch you back to being 20 years old, and you could forget the career you had, Yeah, that's now gone in a memory bank. You can now have a new one today as you see football. Take the old one.
Right.
By a mile.
Can I just ask you something from a personal perspective? Growing up, one of my favourite players was Nijinsky, Colin Bell. You shared a pitch with him. What was he like?
He was right at the end of his career when I played, and sadly he was carrying a bit of an injury. So I never played with him when he was at his best, but obviously played in games where he played, where he's in the opposition. He was a great lad, fantastic footballer. What people didn't realise about him, because he was such a great runner, hence they named him Nijinsky after Vincent O'Brien's racehorse, they missed what a skillful player he was. People used to talk about him, what a great athlete. But I've got to tell you, he was some player. His vision was unbelievable. He's one of the few players that you play against or play with that no matter where the ball bounces, they can adjust their body to pass the ball. Glenn Hoddle was very much like that. A lot of players now, when I see them, they've got to have a touch. Or they've got to have 2 touches because they can't adjust their body to hit that pass they need to. Even when they're running with the ball, if the ball's not in a perfect position, they can't make the pass. He was one of the players that could pass the ball wherever it was.
So did that touch have to be perfect in that, because of the Horlocks and players like that, Norman Hunters, those type of players who were so close to you, your touch had to be perfect?
You had to be able to jump. You had to be more like Red Rum than Nijinsky. Yeah, not just your touch had to be perfect. I've got this thing with Sam Allardyce. We used to speak about this a lot. I love Sam. And we used to talk about, so many people say, your first touch. And I always said to Sam, it isn't the first touch that counts, it's the last one. Because you could have the best touch in the world. If you give it away, no one remembers your ball control. They don't remember you giving it away. And he always called me front of the net. Because when someone shoots and they score, they go, it's hit the back of the net. Well, it hasn't. The back of the net's actually behind the goal. It's actually hit the front of the net. It might be the back of the goal, but it's hit the front of the net. So I used to call him last touch and he would call me front of the net. And yes, your first touch had to be good, had to be really good, which on those pitches, for 70% of the season, the pitches were a nightmare, especially the baseball ground. Liverpool was always great. Old Trafford was always great. Spurs was great. But most of the pitches, so your first touch had to be not good, had to be unbelievable. Otherwise, with some of those players that you mentioned, you'd get taken out.
I was saying in your book that you think you would have been probably playing at a higher level in this era because you can't be kicked to bits. Do you look at fullbacks and think, I'd skin him?
Yeah.
Even now?
Yeah.
I'm not saying at your age now, but you could...
Yeah, at my age, I'm not doing bad, yeah.
You talk about playing a game when you're 66 as well, don't you?
No, I know, I'm still playing every Sunday now. No game today, thank God. Yeah, I do. And that's not being arrogant, it's not being conceited. Players were far more aggressive then when you play against a fullback. I mean, I look at left-backs today and I look at a player that I played with. I don't see a left-back even in the same league, Kenny Sanson. Not even in the same league. I look at left-backs today and a lot of them can't turn. So many of them, if you're playing, let's say, on the left wing and you're right-footed. Let's take Martinelli as an example at Arsenal. So many times he beats people by just dropping his shoulder and coming inside. Fullbacks spin in a circle. They don't understand how to plant their right foot and then go with him on the inside. So they end up turning a circle or completely losing their balance. In my day, a lot of players didn't do that. A lot of clubs taught players balance. I've been to a few training grounds and I don't see anyone get taught about balance at all.
I spoke to Nicky Butt when he was Manchester United's academy director, and he said they actually had to get a gymnast tumbler in to teach kids how to fall because they don't climb trees anymore. So you've got that. It's a societal thing as well as a suspicion of skill.
Henry, absolutely. And they haven't got the same balance. When we were at Crystal Palace, Terry Venables brought a guy in called Lenny Heppel.
Oh, yeah, dance coach.
Correct.
Remember?
Brilliant. And he taught players balance. And he was incredible. My claim to fame, he said to Terry, he watched us train and whatever, and then he was going to decide what he was going to do and who he was going to do it with. He said, Terry's only one player that I can't help. Silky. And Terry said, is he so bad? And he said, no, his balance is so good, I'm not even going to be able to help him, which was great for me at the time to hear that. But I watched him work. I watched him work with Paul Hinchelwood, with Kenny Sanson, with Jimmy Cannon, Ian Evans, David Swindlehurst, Vince Hilaire. He was unbelievable. And all them players, every one of them, improved more than 20% for just working with him, because they changed direction so much quicker. And I just watch players today. I watch, as Sean said, I watch fullbacks. They're just average a lot. Not all of them. Don't get me wrong. Some of them would have played in any era, at any club. But a lot of them, they're not that good. They're more footballers. We now play a game where defenders have got to be excellent on the ball, but not so good at defending. When I played, you had to be excellent defending. Didn't worry if you weren't so good on the ball.
This is Sunday Edition on Talksport with Sean Custis and Henry Winter, and the brilliant Barry Silkman stays with us to talk about how he went from footballer to agent. It's Sunday Edition with Sean Custis and Henry Winter, where we've been joined by our special guest Barry Silkman, who's the footballer turned agent. Barry's got a book out, The Not So Secret Football Agent, which he talks about his whole career, and also his transition from going from player to agent, and also in between, where he was actually a frustrated singer who sang backing vocals for one of Hot Chocolate's biggest hits.
Correct. Yes, I don't like speaking about that. I get too frustrated.
You talk a lot about being a singer.
I know,
in here.
to think how close I came to really smashing it at singing.
Yeah.
And then it didn't happen.
You were doing lots of things, though. You were busy playing football. You were doing lots of things. And
loads of things.
The other thing that comes across in the book, Barry, is how very early on you started studying players. We get used to agents, and they get criticised a lot for, they're only in it to make the money. They just say, hey, I've got a great player. He wants £50,000 a week, and I want my signing on fee. And they don't really know anything about them. But you talk here about how you were judging players for managers while you were still a player. They were asking for your advice.
Terry Venables did. Yeah. All the time. From the minute I joined Crystal Palace, he knew me from when I was young. He'd met me when I was young, and he spoke to me. I was about 15, 16 when I first met him, and I didn't know it then, but he said to me, I was so impressed with your knowledge of players at 15, 16. And when I joined Crystal Palace, the first thing he said to me is, we've got a player here, Silk. He's played last year a lot in the reserves then there was a reserve teams, centre half, centre midfield, centre forward. He ended up the top goal scorer. I was never really sure what his best position is. And obviously Malcolm Allison was the manager and Terry had just taken over. He said, can you watch him in training? And after a week or 10 days, give us a view. We had one training session with the ball. It was the first one. As we finished and broke for the lunchtime, because it was pre-season, so it was morning and afternoon training, I walked up to him, I said, TV? He said, yeah. I said, fullback. He didn't know what I was talking about. He said, what? I said, he's a fullback. And who's a fullback? I said, that player you asked me to watch. He said, how do you know? He said, you've only been an hour and a half. I said to him, close your eyes. And he looked at me. He went, what? I said, close your eyes. So he shut his eyes, and I said, this is everything that player can do really well. And I went through what he did in training. I said, what have I described? He said, you've described a fullback. I said, that's what he is. He ended up playing for England under 21s, Paul Hinchelwood.
Mm-hmm. You also talk about, you mentioned Sansom earlier on, how you were always bigging him up.
Kenny Sansom. Terry also said to me, would you play him? And I said to Terry, do you think he's good enough? He said, yeah, but he's so young. I said, TV, I think he's brilliant. If you think he's good enough, don't matter whether he's 16 or 36. Play him.
Tell us about, there's a couple of really Belton stories in here about Diego Maradona and Zinedine Zidane. I'll start with Maradona, because you basically told Terry Venables how to get rid of Maradona from Barcelona, which everybody go, what? What do you want to get rid of Maradona for?
I know. What happened? Terry and I had a great relationship with football, and he never stopped talking to me about asking me different things, and we discussed a lot of things. We used to go to Morton's, which was in Berkeley Square, almost every home game on a Saturday night. We'd go there. I never drank alcohol. We just spoke football, and we got to know each other really well. And he went to Barcelona. I was a bit gutted, actually, because the first job he had was Crystal Palace. I was the first player he signed. Second job he had was Queen's Park Rangers. I was the first player he signed. He went to Barcelona. I went, well, what happened there? and he phoned me. He was only there a little while. He phoned me. He went, Silk, got a problem. So I said, what? He said, I've got a player here. I don't want him here. So he said, Maradona. So I said, why? He said, legs are gone. He said, he's gone a yard slower in his brain and a yard slower in his legs. And the problem I've got, the players just want to keep giving him the ball. So everything is going through him. And the way I want to play, it's not going to work. He said, I've got a player here called Bernd Schuster. Do you know him? I said, yeah, the blonde German player, midfield. He said, I need everything to go through him. How do I get rid of Maradona? So we just get rid of him. He said, I can't. President loves him. Supporters love him. I said, TV, remember the conversations we've had that when you take over as a manager, it is the only time you're really powerful. People think when you win the league, you're powerful, but you're not, because the best managers in the world want your job. So when you first walk into that job, is the only time you're powerful. I said, just go to the president and tell him you don't want him. He went, do you think it'll work? I went, I've got no idea. I said, but just tell him, and tell him the reasons. Phoned me back a couple of weeks later. He went, Silk, he's gone. And he went on to win the league, and Bernd Schuster was unbelievable.
And Maradona went on to star for Napoli and win the league there and World Cup.
Different style of football. The way Terry wanted to play. Every team has a different style.
Yeah.
So you could be perfect for one person's style, but not for the next manager.
Barry, we're running out of time. We really could have done with an hour with you today, but
let's get rid of the next person.
Tell us the Zidane story, which is particularly close to my heart, because you picked him out and recommended him to Newcastle.
I did.
Let's say this is the days where you don't see a lot of football on TV. There's not a lot of video clips of that, and you've seen him. Tell us.
I went out to watch him play. I was told about him. Went out to watch him. I watched 45 minutes. He'd come on He'd actually had the flu on the weekend and he weren't going to play. He was sub. And the game was desperate. It was 0-0. And there was one really good player called Bizanti Lizarazu, left back. He looked terrific. All the others, it was just a nothing. He come on at half-time, scored 2 and made 1. But after 15 minutes, you could see. I didn't have to sit there any longer. His brain was 2 yards quicker than everyone on the pitch. And I saw the president after the game. Also, there was an agent here called Jerome Anderson who told me about him and said we get the paperwork. And I spoke to the president after the game, and they wanted £1.2 million. And they said, we'll give you back a commission out of that. I come back. I thought, right, it's only one club this guy really suits. Newcastle. He would make them a better team. And they were at the top of the league. And I phoned Kevin up. Had a great relationship with Kevin. In fact, he phoned me a little while.
Well,
I spoke to him on the phone a little while ago. Yeah, his was perm though. Mine's natural. So Kevin always said he thought I was the best judge of a player he'd ever met. And he loved me as an agent, which was lovely for me because he'd been a great player, like a really great player. And he was a lovely, lovely man. So I told him about Zidane, and he sent a scout to watch him. So Kevin never watched him himself. Managers don't get time. So he sent the scout, and I will never forget this, in the day of the fax machines. Yeah. No emails went round, no, everything was fax machines. And you heard the fax start up, and then sometimes you run out of ink or a cartridge. Oh, God. I get a phone call on the Monday and said, Silky, in the next half hour, you'll be getting a fax about the player. The fax come through, and I will never, ever forget it. I wished I'd have kept it, but you don't even think of those things. The fact said, Silky has grossly over-exaggerated the player. And at that time, Wolves were bottom of what is now the Championship. He said, Silky's grossly over-exaggerated the player. And I don't even think he could play for Wolves. I said to Kevin, whoever it was that went to watch him, sack him. And what I did, I picked the phone up and I phoned a guy called Maurizio Peverali, who was the brother-in-law of Roberto Bettiga, who used to run Juventus. And Maurizio used to do a bit of scouting for him. I said, Maurizio, go and see your brother-in-law. Tell him I've seen a player, Zinedine Zidane, just go and buy him. Phoned me back a couple of days later, he said, Silky, they know the player. They really like him. Rest is history.
Well done, Barry Silkman,
Brilliant,
a
Barry.
spotter of footballers. Barry's book is The Not So Secret Football Agent, talking about his life as a player, as a singer, and as an agent. Barry Silkman, thank you very much. That's it.